Chicago Bears big free agency preview 2025. What's up, guys? Tomorrow sets the stage for the NFL offseason and the free agent frenzy kicks off. My favorite oxymoron, the NFL's legal tampering period, begins at noon Eastern, 11 Central on Monday morning, and teams can agree to deals with new free agents. Tonight, I wanted to preview what to expect in this year's free agency. I'm going to cover the top targets at positions of need, recap what moves we've already made this week, and talk about what I expect from the Chicago Bears once free agency officially opens up. All that and more. Let's go ahead and get right into it. First, let's quickly recap the moves that we've already made in the last week. Ryan Poles started off by shoring up the interior of the offensive line by trading two day three picks for guards. He landed Joe Thuney, who is easily one of the best guards in football, and Jonah Jackson, who played his best football in Detroit under Ben Johnson. These two moves really started the transformation of our offensive line, although we still need a center as well as some more depth. But Ryan Poles made a statement that he is making the O line a priority this offseason. And then after moving on from DeMarcus Walker and Gerald Everett, the Bears also signed former Dolphins tight end Durham Smythe, who worked with Ben Johnson in Miami. We've also re-signed special teams ace Josh Blackwell to a 2-year deal worth up to $6 million total. Blackwell not only provides depth in our secondary, but he's simply one of the better special teamers in the NFL. And speaking of special teamers, linebacker Amen Ogbongbemiga and defensive end Daniel Hardy also had 1-year contracts tendered. And then finally, one game legend guard Bill Murray is also coming back. Murray had one of the most memorable debuts I've seen before going down with an injury that ended his season. But Bill Murray's definitely a sleeper to watch when we get in preseason this year. And then there were also reports that the Bears have also tendered cornerback Amir Speed and defensive tackle Jonathan Ford. And then they also placed a right of first refusal tag on free agent defensive tackle Chris Williams. It does carry a $3 million cap tender, but that number is really irrelevant. It just gives the Bears the right to match the first offer he receives. If we choose not to match any offer he gets, it's not going to cost us anything against the cap. Also, Chris Williams provided a big boost on the D line late last season as a situational pass rusher. He's not a superstar, but he's not a bad rotational piece. Okay, and now it's finally time to talk about this year's upcoming free agent class. After making two big time trades before we even started free agency, what is the Bears' number one priority on this roster right now? To me, it's finishing the overhaul that he started on the offensive line, and he gets that done by signing a veteran center. We've been talking about Drew Dalman for a long time now, but to me, I believe he could be one of the top targets for Ryan Poles and company. Drew Dalman would instantly upgrade the position. He is the best center on the market, but after Dalman, there are a few other options available. The Raiders just released their starting center, Andre James. If we go back a year, James was viewed as a top 10 center in the NFL and an ascending player. But with the Raiders drafting Jackson Powers Johnson last year, it has made him expendable. And while James is not on the same level as Drew Dalman, he's easily one of the top 3 centers on the market. He had a down year in 2024, but he's only 27 years old and offers a lot of upside. Keep an eye on Andre James if we don't land Drew Dalman. The other two names that make a ton of sense right now are Ryan Kelly and Josh Myers. Ryan Kelly's on the wrong side of 30, but he's been one of the best centers for the last decade. Meanwhile, Josh Myers is another ascending player. He's 25 years old and he started 56 games for the Packers over the last 4 seasons. I really liked his tape out of Ohio State. He was Justin Fields' center, and he's my sleeper option at the position. After those four, though, I'm not sure there are many options to upgrade at center. Yes, we could bring back Coleman Shelton. He wasn't as bad as some people make it seem, and putting him between Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson could make him a lot better. And then there's Evan Brown, who did spend some time in Detroit with Ben Johnson, But other than that, the center market doesn't offer many options. But the good news is we should still be able to land one of these starting centers. And on top of that, we can still draft a center as well. Even though I don't think we want to rely on a rookie starting center, we can still draft one to develop behind a veteran. But adding a veteran should be a priority. But before talking about our second biggest need in free agency, I wanted to quickly mention the left tackle position. I made an in-depth video last week breaking down our options at left tackle in both free agency and this year's draft. And after Ronnie Stanley re-signed with the Ravens last night, there simply is not a left tackle on the open market that I believe is better than Braxton Jones. Now, we could still sign a swing tackle or maybe someone to compete against Braxton, but the chances of upgrading the position in free agency are slim to none. And if you missed it, I did a video earlier today talking about the depth in this year's draft class, and it is not a good year for tackles either. So upgrading at left tackle might be hard to do this offseason. But let's talk about what's next on Ryan Poles' free agent wish list, upgrading the defensive line. And some people may even view this as the number one priority, and I won't argue that. The only reason I have center listed first is because there are a lot less options to upgrade the center position. So while there are only about a handful of options to upgrade at center, the defensive line features an abundance of options. I think defensive end might be our biggest need, but we can use an upgrade on the interior of the D line as well. So let's talk about the edge rushers first. I don't know if I've ever seen this many Pro Bowl caliber pass rushers on the free agent market. Most years you have one or two guys max that hit the market. The amount of pass rushers available this season is actually kind of crazy. The top options on the market start off with Josh Sweat from the Eagles. He's projected to get around 21 million per year, but he could get a lot more after Myles Garrett just reset the market. Khalil Mack is also an option. I'll talk more about him in a minute. You also have Joey Bosa, who's entering the market at 29 years old. Chase Young is just 25 years old. He has familiarity with Dennis Allen, and he's played on the same defensive line with Montez Sweat before. But there are other top pass rushers available as well. Matthew Judon is an option that I'm a big fan of. My one question with Matthew Judon is he chose the Falcons over us at the trade deadline last year, so I don't know how interested he is in Chicago. But other names like Hassan Reddick and Von Miller also top the list. But there are other guys that I don't even have listed here. This pass rusher market is just insane. There's other guys like Marcus Davenport, Azeez Ojulari, Emmanuel Ogbah, Chauncey Golston, Malcolm Kuntz, Dante Fowler Jr., Josh Uche, Derek Barnett, Charles Omenihu, the Bears' own Darrell Taylor, and veteran Carl Lawson. The amount of options on the market this year at defensive end is absolutely crazy. And I get it. This year's free agency class overall is probably not a very good unit when you look at other positions. But when it comes to defensive line specifically, there are more quality edge rushers available this season than probably any free agency of my entire life. Please show me a free agency where you can find this many quality pass rushers, because I don't remember it ever happening. But there are also a lot of top options at defensive tackle as well. Jonathan Allen, the star defensive tackle from the Washington Commanders, he was just released and is another option on the market. But then you also have Super Bowl star Milton Williams from the Eagles, and then two other guys I like, Javon Hargrave from the 49ers and Levi Onwuzurike from the Lions. So that's four big-time defensive tackles that are at the top of the market as well. But there are also a ton of other options at this position. Draymond Jones, Sheldon Rankins, DJ Jones, BJ Hill, Jaron Reed, Poona Ford, Tershawn Wharton, Taquan Graham, Sebastian Joseph Day, BJ Hill, and even Calais Campbell. This year, the options on the defensive line are stacked, and there's absolutely no excuse for Ryan Poles to not address the position over the next 3 or 4 days. The needs in this year's free agent class actually play perfectly to the needs on this roster for the Bears. And even though Myles Garrett just signed a mega contract that might have reset the market at the position, I think that's only going to affect the young players that are seeking top deals. I think with a guy like Khalil Mack, he could sign a 1 year, $15 million deal. He's not signing for $40 million a season. That doesn't mean some crazy team out there wouldn't pay him that. But if we were to sign a guy like Khalil Mack, I believe it would be because he accepts some kind of a discount to return to Chicago. 1 year, 15 million, 2 years, 30 million. At that price point, sign me up for the return of the Mack. Whether or not it's Khalil Mack, though, that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we just need at least one new pass rusher this year in free agency. I did want to talk about one other need here, though. Our options at slot receiver. I think this is an underrated position of need when heading into free agency. And there's actually some quality options that make a ton of sense. We're losing Keenan Allen, and we're probably not going to pay Keenan Allen type money. But there are some guys on this list that would be great fits and make a lot of sense here. The number one guy that stands out to me is Tim Patrick. He played in Detroit last season with Ben Johnson, and he's a guy who you can move around this offense that allows you to mix in DJ Moore and Romo Dunze in the slot as well. I like Tim Patrick. But another guy that makes sense is Josh Reynolds. He also had his best seasons in Detroit and is also familiar with Ben Johnson. But there are other names on this list that are pretty good slot receivers in the NFL. Darius Slayton is probably my favorite on this list, but the Bears do have options here, and it's something that isn't talked about much, but I do believe there's a good chance we're going to sign a slot receiver. I know fans talk a lot about how Tyler Scott has been underused, but Tyler Scott really isn't a slot receiver. He's a guy who plays on the outside and is more of a deep threat. He doesn't really fit the profile of what we're looking for in a slot receiver. So to me, slot receiver is another underrated need. The other need, then, that most people aren't talking about is swing tackle. There just really aren't a lot of high quality tackle options out there, but I do believe we will sign somebody to be a backup option at the tackle position as well. Keep an eye out for that. Okay, now let's talk about some of the juicy rumors that are floating around. As Jordan Schultz is reporting, the Bears are heavy favorites to sign both center Drew Dalman and defensive end Khalil Mack at the start of free agency tomorrow. And I want to make it clear here, guys. If we could sign Drew Dalman and Khalil Mack, as long as the price was right and it wasn't absolutely out of control, the Bears would already be headed into the NFL draft with most of the needs on our roster checked off. Those are two of my favorite names to watch as we head into free agency. I'd also say, though, keep an eye out for Chase Young. He makes a lot of sense as well. And then a defensive tackle, you can't sleep on Javon Hargrave or Jonathan Allen. They might be priced out of our range, but they would be huge upgrades for our defensive line. But free agency kicks off tomorrow, guys. I wanted to get this out for you. Hopefully, this helps out, but we will have some new Chicago Bears tomorrow. I appreciate everyone who watches. Please hit that like button for me. Stay tuned, and until next time, bear down.